everybody, it's Joe Parrott, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group. Are you feeling stuck with your gun dog training? Trust me, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to be here. Every week, we're bringing you the best tips and hacks to make training your gun dog easy peasy. We'll keep it straightforward, no fuss, just actionable guidance that you can put straight to use. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Found It and Fetched It. This week we're going to talk about our dogs being ahead of the game, and we're going to talk about anticipation in our dogs. Speaking with me this week is LWDG group experts Samantha Thorneycroft-Taylor and Claire Denyer. How are we both today, ladies?
Really good, thanks, Joe. How are you?
I'm enjoying the sunshine. And Claire, how are you feeling?
Yeah, also enjoying the sunshine. It's lovely to not be getting wet. So yeah, really good, thank you.
I think there is a British trend to talk about the weather, but I think right now we are allowed to do it because we've had so much bad weather. It is definitely worth being excited about the good stuff. It's also worth being excited about this podcast because I think when we said about talking about this, I was like, okay, I don't really understand how that's going to be a podcast, but the more we're going to look at it, I think the more people will understand how important this is to their dog training. So can we start by talking a little bit about explaining what we mean by anticipation in dogs, like the signs of it and what the effects of it are?
So this podcast does lead on quite nicely from a previous podcast that we did on patterns of behaviour in dog training, because some of the behaviours that we see that we would say is the dog anticipating something are stemming from patterns in behaviour, a history that's brought up in the dog's mind, that then what we see is, oh, the dog's, why is the dog doing this? They're anticipating this is happening. And it's because of, very often because of the history of patterns that have built up, that the dog is anticipating things. So a really simple example of dogs anticipating is, let's just take in retriever training, when you're doing a walk up and the dogs are being expected to walk to heel in a lineup and stay in a nice, neat heel position. But some people in the early part of training really struggle with the heel work because your dog's already anticipating. They know that what comes next is a shot and a retrieve out front or to the side or sometimes behind. So the heel work has become a lead up to them anticipating an exciting retrieve. So that's an example of how anticipation can create a little bit of frustration or drive in the dog, because they're anticipating the retrieve, not focusing on the heel work. Sam?
Yeah, I think exactly that. It's essentially a learnt sequence based on historical events. As you said, Claire, I had someone said to me the other day that they weren't sure how exactly they got up off the sofa differently when they were going to take the dog out or going to the toilet or anything like that, but the dog knew. So they said, we can get up, we can go to the kitchen, the dog doesn't move. We can get up, we can go to the bathroom, the dog doesn't move. We can get up and go to walk the dog, and the dog jumps up and is all excited. And they said, but surely I'm getting off the sofa in the same way. But the dog has learned to read those signs through the historical repetition, and it's got that anticipation, and it knows that something good is coming on this occasion.
So let's talk a little bit though. Anticipation is a good thing, isn't it? In a lot of our training. For example, if we look at a human world, we anticipate that cars are going to be coming down the road, so we stop. That anticipation makes us wait as a learned behaviour, pattern of behaviour. We use it to our safety. And for our dogs, when they're like going out to get a retrieve, that anticipation is that they know that's coming. So anticipation isn't a bad thing, is it? It can just lead to bad behaviours.
If you look at a dog where you might describe it as reactive on the lead. Now, reactivity could be a multitude of things. It could be overexcitement, could be frustration, could be aggression, could be fearful. There's lots of things, but they all are described as the dog is reactive. It's reacting to something. So a negative reaction could be a dog that decides that because of a history of what's happened when it's seen another dog, when it's been on a lead, it might react negatively. So that could be lunging, barking on the lead toward the other dog because it's anticipating, I'm going to tell you to bog off before you get the opportunity to come over here and harass me. So that sort of anticipation can create very negative behaviours that we don't want our dogs to display. But again, it goes back to a history, very often a history of things that have happened that have led to that behaviour. Sam?
Yeah, I think anticipation can be, like you said, it can be positive anticipation, it can be negative anticipation. The negative anticipation obviously is, for example, the examples that Claire just gave, but then you do have the positive anticipation. My dogs, when they see me dressed in my picking up gear in the winter, they are then full of anticipation of going out on a working shoot, and that their drive increases, their desire to do increases. So in that sense, that anticipation is useful and really helps to propel the dog through the day. So I think there's a balance, and I think anticipation isn't an ugly word, which sometimes it's perceived to be, provided you've got the rules and the boundaries in place, which then mean that you can iron out the negative anticipation and utilize the positive anticipation.
So if we talk about it, like what sort of triggers a dog's anticipation and the common signs that a dog is anticipating something, but it's led by cues, isn't it? So it's a physical or like a visual or a smell or something they hear. Something is a cue to trigger their behavior.
They so yeah, they see things, they sense things, they smell things that in the past have meant something. If I come home and I smell a cake in the oven, I know I'm getting cake for pudding that night. It's that anticipation. History dictates the smell of a cake in the oven means I'm going to get to go and eat cake. History dictates for the dog, if they see you picking up your whistle or your lead, they're going to get a walk. It also dictates if they have had success in their mind by shouting at other dogs passing by, then and the other dog has left, then they're probably going to repeat it again. So it's reading the signs and signals of the environment, the people around them and the animals around them, and then in turn us reading the signs and the signals of the dog.
Fear can be really brought on by a pattern of things that have happened, and like you said, Joe, cues that give that away, behaviors that we do, the environment we're in, a certain smell. So when you're working with dogs who maybe have a negative association with something in life, whatever that might be, that could be triggered by a smell. So I worked with a behavior case a few years ago. It was really interesting, and we couldn't work out why this dog had a fear-based aggression towards specific things, and we were trying to get to the root cause of it so that we could really help the dog grow in confidence. Anyway, it turned out it was the smell of alcohol that was the trigger, because the person that was connected to what had happened in the past had drunk a lot. Okay, so the dog would smell alcohol and start to behave fearfully because of that. So that anticipation came from a smell that the dog was picking up on, rather than a specific place or a sound. All of those things could do that, but in this case we got to the bottom of it eventually, and it was the smell of alcohol. And how crazy is that the dog anticipated a bad experience based on that smell? That just, at the time, I was so relieved we finally got to the bottom of it. But it took such a long time, because we were like, okay, so it's not clothing, it's not movement, it's not there. We were like, where is this going? And we had to really think and delve really deep. So I think we can so often just see a behavior and want to tell the dog off for it or praise them for it if it's positive, but we don't often think hard enough about where the dog has learnt that from, and so then why it's anticipating things. And you're thinking, why are you behaving like this? And it's because of something historically, even down to something like smell, Joe.
I can even think from our perspective, I don't know, you can drive past a McDonald's and the smell outside McDonald's, I'm pretty convinced, somebody will tell me, I'm sure by email, that they pump the smell outside as well, because it is literally only like outside a McDonald's. The smell makes you think, oh, I fancy one of those. And you might not fancy one of those, but there's something, one thing is affecting another. Now, psychologists will go into the nitty gritty of it. But I can see for a dog, if you think about it from the perspective of, for example, the sound of shot means I'm going on a retrieve. but then it's not their retrieve, how that can then be like, hold on, that tells me this happens, and now you're not letting that happen, so I'm getting really wound up about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see this so much in group classes where dogs maybe are so used to training on their own, and so they're training on their own and they're really super steady, but then you put them in a group and it creates behavior problems that are usually frustration based, and the dog is, but it's mine, must be mine, it's always mine, how is it not mine now? So you see that unsteadiness, that lack of self-control, that frustration, all those behaviors that go alongside that, which is because history has taught the dog, when I see that, I get to go and have fun. And then all of a sudden they're in a group scenario and the dog goes, what do you mean it's not mine? It's always mine when I see the thing go out. So yeah, that is another form of anticipation, and can then lead to things where, let's just say, the owner then gets frustrated, and so then the dog has a negative then association with that sort of group scenario, because now the owner's acting really different and not handling me like they normally do. And all of these things build in and create behaviors based on history, which then create an anticipation of what's going to happen next. Sam?
Yeah, I think, and something you said then just triggered something in my mind. So potentially a slight little deviation, but you wouldn't expect any more, any less from me, obviously. So when you were talking about retrieving and it going from a single dog being trained on its own to then working in a group class, it made me think about the length of the retrieve as well. So quite often when we're working with dogs, the distance that the dog is comfortable retrieving at, and it has this anticipation that it's going to find a retrieve, is as far as the owner can throw. So if the owner can only throw for 30 yards, the dog is used to it's got that anticipation that it's going to find a retrieve within 30 yards. And then we start trying to extend the retrieves or making them memory retrieves, or someone else throws the retrieve. And then that can bring in other problems, because this anticipation that the dog had that it was going to find something, then it doesn't find something, then it loses confidence, then it needs to have extra handling, then the owner wonders what they're doing wrong. And again, that what started as a positive anticipation can then become a real confidence knocker for the dog. And if it's done too many times, repeated too many times, then you can end up with a dog that actually doesn't then have a positive association with retrieving. It has almost like this negative worry anticipation that it's not going to find what you want it to find. So it can create this quite vicious circle.
And you see this a lot with how dogs start to read their handler's body language. Things like putting the whistle in their mouth before they're going to do a stop whistle. The dog anticipates, you're going to stop me. So then they're sticky on the send out, things like that. All these things from anticipation. And when I'm working with clients with spaniels, and maybe we're working on handling, and I explain that very quickly they've got to get their hands out of the equation in hunting, because then the dog is just looking at the handler, anticipating that they're going to tell them with their body language, with their hands or arms, where the dog's meant to be going, when actually the dog should have its nose down and the dog should be doing the job and working through that, whatever the ground is, whatever the cover is that they're working through. But yeah, what we do as handlers can create this anticipation. So for example, if the handler is holding on to something, they've got to be so discreet. So when they're hunting the spaniel, they've got to be so discreet when they drop that find down for the dog, because if the dog spots them drop that find down, they're going to anticipate that the thing they find is coming from the handler. So they're going to be looking up at the handler instead of keeping their nose down on the ground. So all of these things we do create anticipation in the dog's mind, whether that's positive or negative towards our goal. And so it's being really mindful in that moment.
We saw an example, or I saw an example, I'm sure Sam will back me up, in Sam's scary training day for our members. We were doing a long retrieve. It was like literally in a fenced off, narrow run. And every dog saw the dummy go down, without a doubt. Before Sam let them go, or let their owners let them go, they could see the retrieve. And loads of them would run out like a little bit, like probably about 30 yards, and then turn and go, oh, do you want me to go further than I normally go? It was so fascinating to watch, because I was like, every single one of these dogs has seen that dummy go down without a doubt. They've all marked. But yeah, it's just that example, like you just said, they were looking then, Claire, to the handler for that reassurance. Do you want me to go further than I normally go now here?
Exactly that, Joe. Do you want me to go further? But also, the majority of the time, we train our dogs just us and our dog. And then you go to a training environment, either one-to-one with a trainer or group trainer or an event like Discovery Day that you just mentioned. And then there is another person that's throwing the retrieve. And a lot of dogs, they can't get their head around the fact that the retrieve hasn't come from their handler. Like Claire was saying earlier, the dog sees you drop something out while they're hunting, they're going to start looking at the handler. Those dogs that were going out, they were going out because they were sent out, and history dictates run out because mummy or daddy told me to, and I'll go and find something. And then they get partway through the retrieve and they go, this is further than usual, and there's a stranger over there. You haven't thrown this for me, so am I still going? So again, it's what started with this anticipation. I know what's going on. I've been sent for a retrieve. Then becomes a bit of a, I thought I knew and I'm now not so sure. But we've just got to use or build that confidence in the dog, use that initial anticipation to really get the dog confident going out and pushing on, pushing further.
And that's absolutely right, Sam. And I think when we think about it, this is why so often we're saying to clients, you've got to change the pattern of what you're doing frequently. Once the dog has learned a skill, you then need to change the pattern of how this happens, because they learn patterns so quickly, which then leads to anticipation, which then leads to behavioural things happening. And the owner's just thinking, why has this gone wrong? And it's no, the dog is just anticipating the end piece. So the dog will try and skip things, right? So if you think about the delivery of the dummy, when we're working with little beginner retrievers, we teach them to recall in, sit in front of the handler, then come into the heel position. At that point, the retrieves are probably all very informal, so just little game of fetch. Then when we start to formalize the retrieve, we use what we've taught the dog in the recall to transfer into the retrieve. So you bring the retrieve in front of me. We don't ask for a sit and delivery straight away because a lot of young dogs can't do that. We build to that if that's the handler's goal, but they come in front, deliver the retrieve, then come into the heel position. Now, what I find very often with young dogs through this process is they start skipping out the bit in front because they're like, I get the reward when I get to the side. So the dog will run in with the retrieve, and instead of delivering in front, will come straight round to the side, want to get rid of that dummy as quickly as possible. So they might start spitting the dummy in anticipation of getting the reward in that end place in the heel position. So we might need to backtrack and break that down a little bit and take the retrieve and reward the dog in front before we then bring them to heel to break that pattern, because the dog isn't being naughty. Through history of what's happened, they anticipate the end goal, the end where the reward happens. So they just try and skip a few bits to get there.
I think also it's that anticipation about the reward you were talking about. We use that anticipation of reward on things like a recall, be it just a straightforward recall or a recall away from another dog or a person or livestock, any of that sort of stuff. We rely on the fact that we've taught the dog to anticipate, get back to me as fast as you possibly can, and there will be a nice reward for you, whatever that reward might be. Food, hunting, retrieving, obviously that the type of rewards depends on the dog. But like Claire was saying about young dogs just then, and them trying to skip pieces in this chain, trying to skip through the links to get to that reward at the end. I'm sure we've all seen it when we're trying to teach a new dog, a young dog, a new behavior or a new position, and the dog knows that if it gets it right, it's going to get a reward. So then what it does, maybe you're trying to teach it to stand on command rather than to sit or to lie down or whatever. And you see the dog literally jumping through every other position and activity and behavior that it knows, because it's like, I'm not really listening to you at the moment, but I'm going to give you my paw. I'm going to jump up. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to lie down. I'm going to roll over. I'm going to spin. I'm going to do everything you've ever taught me to try and get it right, to get that reward that it's anticipating.
Honestly, position transitions are probably one of the biggest time I see anticipation with my own dog, Rose. I don't see it so much with the others, but with her specifically. If one of those positions is slightly weaker, I might spend a bit of time like doing that position again and rewarding that position, doing that position again and rewarding it. And what you just said there, Sam, because I do that, she then starts to anticipate that she gets the reward for that one. And I've not stopped rewarding the other ones, but maybe I'm not rewarding them ones as frequently. So she flies through some of the positions or misses a position that I asked for to give me the one that she's had the most rewards for recently because she's anticipating getting that high value reward. So I might say, a good example, so I'll say, and I'll mix up the order in which I do them, but I might do sit down and stand, and then I might mix it up and go stand down. And then if I repeat a pattern too quickly or I've over rewarded one because it's weaker, what will happen is she'll fly out of one into another one. And the one that it happened on most recently was the down, because she was jumping out of the down before I was asking her to come out of the down. So she was going down and then springing immediately out of it into a stand, because she was like, the stand is the one that I got that reward for last time. And I'm like, oh, no, hold the down. So then I started rewarding the down. So then she was freezing in the down or flying out of a sit into the down. And so you have to really think about how you're rewarding, how frequently you're rewarding. Are you rewarding intermittently? Are you trying to strengthen each behavior, so then rewarding each behavior? You have to really think about it, because the dogs just learn these things so quick and they start anticipating what's next, either anticipating what is next or also the reward, where the reward comes in that pattern. So yeah, it's crazy.
If we talk about this even further, like going back to the scary training day, we trained with Sam's husband, Alex, who's fabulous. And the way I saw anticipation used in a really positive way, and I've never seen this done before, so maybe it's my naivety or lack of experience with dogs, but in order to get the dog running the scurry on the right to speed up, we run a dog outside the scurry on the left. So the dog that was running could see that another dog was going to be going the same way as it at the same time. I've seen the use of, if a dog's reluctant to retrieve, that you may hold that dog back and let him watch others together, competitive, or that want to do it. But this was using anticipation. The dog's, no way is that dog getting to my dummy before me. I'm flying out. I am going at pace. And I just thought, wow, isn't it clever? Like, we talk about anticipation and about positive and negatives, but isn't it clever how we can really do so much more than maybe we think we can do with it?
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I think we underestimate how we can use that to our advantage in training our dogs, and how we can change behavior and how we can turn negatives into positives. I think we totally underestimate it. Sam?
We use, I'm trying to think how to put this into words. We use anticipation in sorts to change or to carry out behavior modification. So we use some form of anticipation quite a lot of the time to change a dog's association with something or someone. But obviously the way that you do it, the way that you use it is specific to the dog. But on the surface of it, if you like, if you've got a dog that is fearful with people wearing sunglasses, you would use anticipation of previous historical events that the dog has done and carried out well to then work alongside. So they see that person in, what did I say, sunglasses, and then they're getting the positive bit. So it is utilizing that anticipation for the benefit, as well as appreciating that we also have negative anticipations from dogs that we've got to clear up, for want of a better phrase.
So are we on about here, like pairing something they associate as being really positive and rewarding with something they anticipate as being negative, and hopefully helping the positive weaken the negative association?
That is exactly what I was trying to say. Yes, you explained it beautifully.
You did it beautifully.
That really nicely, Joe. That was awesome.
I just don't know where that came from, but it came from you guys, so I do know where it came from. Okay, let's talk about, are there specific breeds or dogs that are more prone to showing us these quick anticipatory behaviours?
Yes, especially if you're going to talk about breed specific behaviours. And so those things that come naturally to the dog, of course, they're more quickly going to anticipate them. So yes, absolutely. Understanding the breed and what is innate in that breed. So it doesn't need to be trained, doesn't need to be taught, doesn't need to be repeated multiple times to build that history. Yes, you're going to get probably what seems more like anticipation in those areas for sure. Sam?
Yeah, I think you just said the genetic behaviours. So, for example, a collie gets loaded into the back of the truck and driven into a sheep field. It's going to anticipate that it's time to go to work and round up some sheep, but you wouldn't expect a chihuahua to pick up that same anticipation if you put it in the back of a pickup truck and drove it into a field of sheep. Are most of the time enjoy retrieving, so they anticipate, they see a dummy best and they want to go retrieving. Spaniels are very good retrievers, but they also love to hunt. So there are variations between the breeds, obviously, but I think definitely the breed specific anticipations will come in quicker than if you're trying to teach a dog a behavior that doesn't come naturally to it.
More and more, if you look about breeding and what we're doing with dogs breeding, and we're mixing up breeds with other breeds, and we're breeding dogs very selectively to develop something. So the things that dog comes born with are just so innate. It really doesn't take anything for that then to become something the dog just does naturally. But I think people forget when they're putting specific breeds with other specific breeds, you've got to look at both sides of the coin, but you might get really positive strengths from one side and really negative things that maybe you don't want coming through from the other side. And so then in your training and understanding of that breed mix, you're going to be looking to bring out the things that you want more of and try not to do things that are going to bring out the things that you don't want more of. And so that's where our chains, our patterns can work in our advantage to create the right anticipations of the right things. I think I said that round the right way. And obviously try not to so using management as well as education to prevent the dog doing the things that we don't want the dog anticipating and doing more naturally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose the more we are aware as a handler what anticipatory behaviour is going to do for our dogs, the more we have to be aware of, is this something I want them to do every single time or not? So for example, I can always remember, we've mentioned before, my dad would set a dog up for a retrieve left or right, and then he'd always do this like stupid little dance, right? Like I used to, then I used to get cross with him. Now I would pay anything to see it again. But I know what he was doing. It wasn't that he wanted to dance with his dogs. He wanted the dog not to be that he was going to anticipate which way he's going to go just from a lean of his body. He wanted the dog to wait till he actually made the movement. In cases like that, I think we can use, if we are sensible, this behavior so much to our advantage.
We can, absolutely. And I think I was working with a cocker spaniel recently that had really good anticipation of retrieving, but that it had gone too far the other way. So then running in had become a real issue, and its owner was struggling to get it to stay steady again. So we went through a lot of body movements, like you were saying with your dad. Just because I put my hand up doesn't mean you're about to get sent, because the dog was jumping the gun. So you put your hand up, oh no, I'm just going to put my hair behind my ears, or you'd go to move your hand and you'd have a stretch, anything. So the dog then, in that instance, you're trying to dampen the anticipation a little bit so that the dog can then use its brain and put the thought processes in order, and then go, okay, just because you've moved doesn't mean I'm about to be sent. I've got to sit, I've got to think about this, I've got to use my impulse control and the steadiness that I've been taught to wait for that command to go.
That's exactly it. We don't want our dogs anticipating everything. We want them to be listening to us. And I think this is also where, and to bring this up because it's important, distracting a dog from doing something is not teaching them to listen. You're just distracting them. So I think if you've got a dog that's really anticipating and as a result of that has frustration issues, is running in, like you said, Sam, on the retrieves, is preempting what you were describing, Joe, with the directions there. Distracting the dog is never going to change the behavior pattern. It's never going to change the dog's anticipation because you're merely just distracting the dog. And that's where we have to use training and education and changing patterns to stop the dog having those issues and to get them anticipating that if they're patient, they will get the reward. And it's distracting the dog will never create that. You will never get that merely by distracting the dog. You're not actually changing the mindset of the dog.
If you think about it, I'm sure most people listening to this, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm sure it's everyone. You walk past the fridge, you open the fridge, and I sometimes think, why on God's earth am I in the fridge? I wasn't going to get anything out of the fridge. I just walked past it. And it is like that automatic behavior, isn't it? We've made it every time we do this. So at that point, I'm not anticipating I'm going to get something out of the fridge. However, if I've opened it, even I thought, why am I in the fridge? I don't want to be in the fridge. My brain then says, my anticipation says, but something nice is now in this fridge, so I'm already here. And it's all those different behaviors, all those different ways we think as humans and dogs think, they all collide in this jumbled mess. So when you're trying to work out what's wrong with your dog, you're sifting through, aren't you, trying to find, is it this bit that's causing the issue, or is it this bit causing the issue? You've got to break it down into tiny bits. Your problem is not my dog won't retrieve, it's my dog won't retrieve, and it's because of this bit.
100%, Joe. You're on fire today, aren't you? You are on fire. 100%. And this is the thing. If the dog has done this thing, whatever the thing is, and that has been self-rewarding, then the dog has learned through its actions and will now anticipate future success based on what it's done being rewarding. You know, I think we totally underestimate dogs, and we totally underestimate how quickly they learn things and then anticipate what that end result will be. And sometimes that's to our benefit and sometimes it's not. And so we have to think about that, and we have to be like, why is this happening? What is the dog anticipating the end result to be? Because the behaviors you are seeing with your dog are based on what the dog is anticipating the end result to be.
I almost feel like this shouldn't be a podcast, people listening on the podcast. This should be one of our masterclasses. We really are going in depth on this one, far more than we normally do. How can anticipation be used to strengthen a bond between you and your dog?
I think you can use it in multiple ways. You can use it playing games with your dogs, all that sort of thing. It nurtures the bond, it nurtures the relationship between you and your dog. And if the dog has got anticipation that the game is fun, and if the dog then learns or gets this anticipation that you are fun because you play the game, then that can only help to strengthen the bond. And if you're the one that picks up the dummy vest and takes it out to go training, again, you're nurturing this all-encompassing bond that we provide all the fun, that we provide all the stimulation, we provide all the health and welfare needs as well. And again, that can only increase the relation, improve the relationship between you and your dog.
Works both in training, as Sam's just described, but also in behavior. Rose has the most beautiful temperament, but we're having to really educate our latest puppy, Jeannie, in that Rose is not her personal giant teddy bear that she can drag around and, you know, lay on and squash. And Rose will not correct her. She won't correct her. She has corrected her twice in the time that we've had her, and she's now 5 months and we got her at 8 weeks. And those corrections have been really quite pathetic, that they are not going to work. Whereas Indian Dude have educated her through appropriate corrections from day one. Now, Rose has learnt through everything Sam just said, through historical behaviours with me, through my behaviours with my dog, that I will always protect her. So I had to really think about this and think, hang on a minute. So the reason that when Jeannie is beating up Rose, for use of a better word, like that's basically it. Why does Rose run to me? Rose runs to me because she's learned in her life, throughout her life, that I'm her safety net, I'm her place to be. She doesn't feel the urge or need to be aggressive, do anything, because mum will always bail me out of this. That's anticipation. That's my dog anticipating that she doesn't need to behave a certain way because I am the one in control that can deal with it. There are pros and cons to that. I would like her to correct Jeannie so that she's not reliant on me anymore. But I also know that Jeannie, being a beautifully temperament puppy, it's just a little phase she's going through. We're managing it because I'm correcting, and Jeannie will grow out of it. She totally will, because it's not a behaviour that I will allow to continue. So it's that whole thought process around that. But yeah, like Sam said, when I put my training vest on and I go out with my dogs, don't run for the hills or go off doing their own thing. They're looking at me for what are we doing? So we can build that anticipation, we can build that relationship, we can build that strength of character of our dog by everything we do with them throughout their lives. And we can create resilient, capable, behaved dogs. The thing is, life happens, things happen to dogs out of our control sometimes, and then we have to step in, and then you're looking at behaviour modification and all these things. But the overriding fact is there's always going to be an element of genetics, and there's always going to be an element of the way the dog has been brought up that also comes into play in what you're seeing. So I think just, yeah, look at your dog's behaviour and be like, what is my dog learning from this? What will my dog's anticipation be of that? Because if somebody's taking their dog out and they're saying to me, the minute I unclip the lead, my dog's off, I'm like, okay, that's because your dog's not anticipating that being around you is going to provide the fun, which is exactly what Sam just said. Yeah, such important things to consider in life with your dog.
And in the last example you just given, that dog that runs off is anticipating. I come off the lead and I shoot out at 900 miles an hour, because you see it so many times, don't you? People will open a car door, dog's gone, and I'm like, the dog has learned to do that. Like, that dog didn't do that in the beginning as a pup. That dog did not, at a 12-week-old pup, jump out the car and fly up the mountain.
It didn't, and you often see that anticipation, or from our point of view, negative anticipation, when you're trying to get the dog to the point where you unclip the lead for it to leg it across the field, because that's often the stretch of heel work. Claire was saying earlier, the walked up situation, getting your dog along the road or along the path to the field is often one of the main struggles when I meet someone new. And it's that I often say to them, do you always let your dog off the lead at the same point? And I would say 9 times out of 10, yes, once we're in the field, we unclip the lead. And I'll say to them, just start changing that up a bit. You want to walk into the field, walk 50 yards, put the dog on the lead, or walk into the field, walk 20 yards, walk back out the field again, and then go back in and then let it off the lead. Change it around, change that pattern, the pattern of behavior that we've got in that instance, because it's human nature. Now I'm off the road and I'm in a safe place, I can let my dog off the lead. So the dog has got the anticipation of, I've got to get to the field as quickly as possible so that I can then leg it as quickly as possible. So they've not got that nurtured bond that we were saying about, that stay with mum and dad because it's fun. It even works down to in the house and things. Pick your car keys up, put them back down again. Pick the dog lead up, put it back down again. Put your shoes on, make a cup of tea. You're changing the anticipation that the dog has got. We still want the dog to have anticipation in certain events, but we don't want them to start doing cartwheels around the house just because we've put our shoes on and picked the keys up. We want them to be able to contain themselves until we say, right, now I'm ready and it's time to go.
100%. And I think what we hear often is people saying that my dog doesn't enjoy this or it finds this boring. Oh, we are in control of that. We're in control of this. And this is why when I do hill work and obedience with my dogs, I make it fun and I make it engaging, because I don't want the dog to go, you are really super boring, Mrs. Like Miss Owner here. You're really super boring. I want to go off and do my own thing because I have far much more fun out there. I want my dog to want to engage with me and want to be around me and do stuff with me. And that's how you create that dog that doesn't want to bog off across the field, by making what you do with the dog fun. And yes, that does have to include structure, rules, and boundaries. Of course it does. But the actual technical training needs to be fun, needs to be a reason for the dog to want to do it. And I think especially in gun dog training can be made to be so boring and so serious, and it can. And it's no wonder the dogs are anticipating, let me go get that flipping retrieve, because being around you, if you think about it, a working test for a retriever and for spaniels, okay, the spaniels are hunting in front, but the handlers aren't allowed to praise their dog during the test. They're not allowed to reward their dog during the test. So we have to make the training side of it valuable enough for the dog that when push comes to shove and we're in that test scenario, the dog has learned through a history that they're anticipating that at the end of this, it is going to be worth it. And I'm really sorry I can't praise you during this walk up because you're doing this immaculate hill work, but I'm not allowed to tell you that you are. But through history, we can teach the dog, keep it going, and you will be rewarded at the end. So as soon as that test's over, your lead is back on and you can play with your dog and tell them they did a great job. But I think so if you look at a lot of the other dog sports, the owners are quite engaging with the dogs throughout them. Whereas in gun dog training, people get too serious too quick, or too serious in the wrong moment. And in training, we should be teaching the dog why they should be doing this in partnership with us, not off on their own. I really got very excited there.
It's good to be excited. That's why we're passionate about what we do. And I just wanted to add in, you said about the working testing. I was asked a lot on the scary day at the weekend. So can I praise my dog? Can I be noisy? When we were talking about, I'm not going to give away too many things because we're hopefully going to do another one, speeding the dog up and being involved and being enthusiastic. And it was like, oh yes, because these aren't under test conditions. So in this scenario, you can be full of life and recalling them back and giving them loads of fuss and praise. And again, I think that can only help to increase the anticipation on future retrieves and in future training. So like you've just said, Claire, you want that reward history to be, or you want history to dictate that when dog has done something good, it's had a huge amount of reward for it, so that on those few and far between occasions where you cannot reward the dog, such as a working test or a field trial, the dog is going, okay, I'm going to keep going because I know that reward is coming at some point.
I think it's about us not being scared in a training environment to make it fun and making us more exciting than the environment. But then when we go into, now we're just a working test, I don't do working tests, but if you go to a working test or if you go out on a shoot, you can be calmer and you can be more correct, shall we say. I hate saying that, but more correctly behaved, because the dog knows that you're still going to be fun when you get back to the training field.
That's exactly 100% it, Jo. That is it. Okay,
to finish what has been yet again, like I said, masterclass, now podcast, absolutely brilliant. To finish, is there any way we can differentiate between positive anticipation and anxious anticipation? We've talked about both, how we can use it for us, how it can go against us. Is there a way for owners to be able to look at the dog and think, oh, they are not seeing this in an excited, let me out way. They're seeing this in a, I don't want to be in this situation way.
So I think that sort of comes down to two things. One, reading your dog's body language, and two, asking yourself, is this what I want from my dog? And those anxious behaviors that come out from a dog, either they're trying to hide behind you or they're trying to be that aggressor, for want of a better word. They're trying to get that first bog off before the other one has a chance to do it, then you're not going to enjoy it, and the dog's body language probably dictates it's not going to enjoy it. So as with most things in training and behavior, and it comes down, I think, to anticipation as well, if you as an owner are pleased with it and happy with it, then it's a good thing. If you as an owner are not finding it a pleasurable experience, and you can see from the dog's body language that the dog's not finding it a pleasurable experience, then it's not a good thing.
Percent, Sam. And I think this is the thing. If your dog is displaying a behaviour, whether it's an unwanted behaviour or a wanted behaviour, or unwanted but not necessarily bad, as in it's not aggressive, but it's maybe like running in, things like that. If your dog's doing any behaviour, you have to bear in mind the dog is behaving that way. The ultimate reason is the anticipation of the end. So you've got to take a really good look at what the dog's doing and break that down. Are they anticipating something good? Are they anticipating something bad? Bringing that back in and saying, how do we now change the dog's point of view, the dog's feelings, the dog's behaviour, and change what that end anticipation is? And so sometimes you might need to call on a professional to help you do that if you can't see that. And that's fine. That's absolutely what a professional trainer is for, is to help you see beyond your own eyes, to take a look at your dog from the outside and say, this is what I see, and work with you, and never be afraid to admit that you need help.
This question, I might not put in the podcast, but I am fascinated because this is the topic we're on. I love exercising, but I frigging hate going exercising, right? Loads of people are the same. When I get on the treadmill, I hate it. I want to blow the thing up. I have to force myself on it. Within 15 minutes, I'm literally like bouncing, super excited. I come back in, I'm wound up. I absolutely adore it. Now, in my head, why can the anticipation of I'm going to feel like that at the end? I know I am. I love exercising. I cannot get over that anticipation at the beginning about I can't be bothered to do this. I don't want to do this. My question is not about like how do you fix my treadmill problem. My question is, can it be the same for dogs though, where they're anxious maybe about going training, but then when they get training, they love it? How does this work?
Yeah, that is a thing. There are some dogs that are not necessarily comfortable in a group class scenario, but love the retrieving. They need a lot of warm up, which I think is what you've just touched on. Like when you get there, you get 15 minutes in and you're good, you're loving it. And I think for some dogs, group classes are like that. It might be that they feel intimidated in a group. It might be that they feel frustrated in a group. Whatever that is, it can take a warm-up time for that dog to get past that bit, to then anticipate the end bit being the bit they love to do. So yeah, that is actually a thing, Joe. It is a thing. And I think only through time and repetition will you change that.
Do you think though, so when we see meaning but incorrect information like, oh, if your dog doesn't want to go do something, don't go do something, we're almost stopping them having the fun, aren't we? Because like I said, at the beginning, I really don't want to do it. But then when I start doing it, I love it. Sometimes you've got to battle through a little bit of that bit at the beginning. It would be no good for me, my health, my sanity, my emotional well-being, if every time I got really upset, Mark went, I'll scatter some Quality Street on the floor, and you can do that instead of going on the treadmill. The reality is he'll say, look, go on, once you get into the garage, so far away, once you get in the garage and get going, you're going to love it. And he almost like, not forceful with me, but he knows that the best result would be me to get out there and do the work. So sometimes are we better, obviously we've got to read our dogs, but sometimes are we better knowing better and thinking, look, I know once you go and do this, and once you get through this bit, you are going to have the best time. Do we, rather than distract them, keep pushing them?
Yes, ultimately. There are multiple ways of explaining this, but I think probably the easiest one is we know what the future holds, whether that's the immediate future, the 5-minute future, the 30-minute future. The dog doesn't know what is just around the corner. We make the decisions as to what we do on training, and And we adapt our decisions in order to fulfill the dog's needs, but also how they're feeling and how we're feeling. But sometimes you've got to push that dog out of its comfort zone in order to then progress to the next level. So I think I'm going to say it, you can edit it out if you want to, but it's pushing the dog over threshold. Just momentarily maybe, and then bringing it back again, but just teaching the dog that they can manage in this situation. If they just go that little bit outside their comfort zone, then there is something good that happens. For me, it's very similar to when you first passed your driving test. The first time you drove on a motorway was probably really quite scary. But if you pushed yourself out of your comfort zone, you went on the motorway, even if you only did one junction and then got off and came back down a dual carriageway, you repeat that enough times and your anticipation changes. You're no longer at the motorway junction chewing your nails off thinking, oh my God, this is going to be scary. You're like, this is okay because a motorway is a faster road. It's a quicker route to my destination, which means I can have more fun sooner because I'm going to get there quicker.
I agree entirely, Sam. And you said a word that I was going to say also. And I think this is the struggle when you've got people saying that you need to keep dogs under threshold and not put them under stress and let them have choice. As the responsible dog owner or trainer, it is down to us to decide that actually the dog needs to learn to cope with these things, that the dog will never improve if we don't put a little bit of stress on them. And we talk about eustress in some of our masterclasses and podcasts before, and the benefits of eustress for building resilience in a dog and teaching a dog that it can cope with more than it feels like it can cope with. And that it's so important to do that. If we want to progress our dogs and help them to become strong, resilient dogs, we have to be prepared to put them through a little bit of that to help them through. So yeah, Jo, absolutely.
I'll definitely leave in there my admittance of having to be forced out of the door to actually get on the treadmill. But thank you, ladies, for another amazing podcast. It has been incredible. If you are listening and you have enjoyed, please subscribe, review. These things are really, really important in making sure that other people find us and we can help them too. Also, find us on Facebook. We are there, the Ladies Working Dog Group. Look for us on Instagram at Ladies Working Dogs. And hopefully we'll get to speak to you. Send us some emails. Send us what you want us to talk about next. And we look forward to speaking to you all next week. That's it for today's episode. A massive thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to head over to the LWDG and sign up for our membership. Get access to expert-led training, a wonderfully supportive community, and the resources you need to become a confident and skilled gun dog trainer. Let's take this journey together because no woman should have to train her gun dog alone. We'll see you all next week.